Do you know that less than 15% of the books published each year by traditional publishers are by people of color? Well, on Girls Talk Books, we dive into the heart of the publishing industry, tackling the issues of diversity, representation, and access while celebrating the authors and trailblazers who are breaking barriers and making a difference. Whether you're an aspiring author, a publishing pro, or just love a great story, this is your space. So grab your notebook, your favorite drink, and let's turn your publishing dreams into reality. This is Girls Talk Books, where your voice matters. Let's go. Do you know which composer is known as the Dean of Black Women Composers? Or do you know who was the first Black woman to win a Grammy for the Best Musical Score album? Do you know who knows these answers? Nathan Holder. He is the author of Where Are All the Black Female Composers? This award-winning author is an international speaker, musician, and educational consultant. He currently serves on the board of F-Flat Books, APME, City of London Symphonia, and Black Country Music Hub. And his band, Between Worlds, has been featured on BBC Radio. Nate regularly performs around the world, and he has authored 12 books, including Where Are All the Black Female Composers, If I Were a Racist, and the award-winning Listen and Celebrate. Let's welcome Nate Holder.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too. Thank you for joining me on Girls Talk Books. You're probably wondering.
It's a pleasure.
You're probably wondering how I found you or why I reached out to you.
I'm very curious. Yeah.
So a little background about me. So I'm a journalist. That's my background. And I have a self-publishing consulting firm. And in the meantime, what I do, I also write books. And I write books on music. And one of the books that I wrote is called Jammin' in Kalamazoo. And I was commissioned by the Kalamazoo Symphony Orchestra to create a story about kids in their community who inspire their community to give back to music some way. That was all of my directions. So they just gave me a clean slate. And so I created this book called Jammin' in Kalamazoo as 3 characters who were on their way to a music lesson with their music teacher. And they saw her house was burning down. And they were like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And their goal is to help her raise money to fix her house. And in the meantime, they discovered that she was a famous musician at one point. And they interview her on their little, podcast show, and they get all these donations. Not only do they rebuild her house, but they create a new community music school where kids can take music lessons for free. And so Bradford Marsalis was commissioned to put this to music. So it was unveiled a few years ago, and my son Edward, who lives in New York, his dream is to play at Carnegie Hall, and I written a book for him, kind of inspiring kids on their journey to Carnegie Hall. And so during this concert at the symphony, they debuted my son playing, and they debuted the piece performed that Bradford created. And so they started inviting me to more symphony events. And they invited me to one that was composed by James Lee III. I don't know if you know James Lee III. He's an African-American composer. He created a piece called Principal Brothers, where he has an oboe, I think it's a bassoon, flute, and clarinet player, all African-American men who are principal musicians for their orchestras here. And I said, wow, I would love to work with you one day. I have a children's book called A Perfect Fit for Tony about a little boy who goes to an instrument petting zoo, learns about all these instruments, and he finds the perfect fit. And he said, well, I would love to have you come to Philadelphia to see my performance of Principal Brothers. So I'm in Michigan. I flew out. And at that event, Erilyn was there as well. So Erilyn had composed a piece for those particular brothers also. So they were debuting her work and James's work as well. And in my research of Erilyn, I found you because of your book, Where Are the Black Female Composers? Because I had never, when I met her, I had never even, and my son's a musician, he's been, since a little kid, I had never met an African-American or a Black woman composer ever. And so when I was doing my Googling of her, your website came up where you had where are all the black female composers, and it had her in there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to interview him about this, because I never knew that there were black female composers, and not as many as you're sharing. I knew Florence Price, I knew Valerie Capers, I knew of her, but I did not know of Era Lynn and her amazing work creating. Now she's like the musician for the king, where she creates music. So it's like, I had to have you on the show and talk about your work, because you're inspiring kids, you're educating all ages about music, and particularly the classical music genre, which we don't really know a lot about as African Americans here in the U.S. So that was my long introduction of how I discovered you and why I wanted you on the show. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
No, I'm very honored. Like, and it's great to know that there's people like yourself who are doing the work you're doing, right? Writing your books and finding people like myself who are trying to do similar things. You were just trying to make sure that people are aware of, our history, our shared histories, and about the marginalization of certain groups, in this case, Black women.
For sure, for sure. And I want to start off with something pretty cool, because I have your book here. It's pretty cool. So for our audience, we're going to do like a little quiz, and at the end, we'll see if they know the answer. So I picked a couple questions. And so one is, which African American singer sang Price's "My Soul's Been Anchored in the Lord" in 1939? Was it Billie Holiday? Was it Marian Anderson, Bessie Smith, or Camilla Williams? So that's our first one. And then our second question is, which composer is known as the Dean of Black Women Composers? Is it Evelyn Pittman, Avril, Coleridge Taylor, Julia Perry, or I don't know how to say this name, Undine Smith Moore? So they have to know. By the end of this show, we will tell them the answers for that. So I love it. I love your book. And so tell us a little bit, as we get into it, tell us a little bit about you growing up, and what were some things that you were reading? How did your musical journey begin?
Well, my journey began in church. It was really, just that experience of being around folks who, singers, musicians, and just doing that every single week. That was just what we did, right? Every single week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. But that was music for me. It was in church. It was a lot of hymns, especially, when I was younger.
And where did you grow up?
And I was in East London, in England.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So, I mean, I don't know if folks know, but there's a big black population, a fairly big black population in certain pockets of London, and there's a fairly sizable population in East London, and so you know how it is, folks. My parents are from the Caribbean, so they came over to England, and everyone finds each other, and sets up the churches and does Christianity in their own way, and so I was a part of that, and it's still something that informs me to this day.
Wow, I love it. I love it. So you grew up in the church. Were you playing music in the church? Were you singing as a child? What was your church experience like?
Yeah, you know how it is. As a child, it's like you're not allowed to not be singing in church, right? That's just what it is. So, there's a children's choir. In every service, you're singing because, the adults around you. So it's like you have to do it too. And as time went on, as many of us kind of just found our own voices in it and started to write some songs here and there. And I was lucky to have piano lessons and clarinet lessons as a kid. So, every now and again, I'd be playing my clarinet in church too. And then eventually, as I got older, I was able to play piano, for the main service and stuff like that. And then I started to write some songs with my friends, and we started to, go around England and performing some of our own songs, which was really, really cool. And that, translated into me thinking, oh, actually, maybe there's a career in being a professional musician. And I was fortunate to have quite a few older people in my life who were also musicians. And so that really just helped me to see that it was possible.
Wow. And I like what you said. You had people in your life who were musicians, so you saw it was possible. There are so many people who grow up with music and they have the lessons, but they don't really know where it can go. They just know about the rap careers, or if you're a singer, but they don't really know as a instrumentalist, how can you make a career of this? How can you have a passion in music and make it your life work? So I love
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
So did you?
And it's relevant to the conversation to say like all of those people that I looked up to were men as well. I think that's
Mm,
really relevant for the conversation because I didn't grow up with a strong female presence of professional musicians.
okay. Even in the church, there were majority of the men were leading in the church as far as musicians and.
I mean, there were lots of women who were singing, right? And I think there's one woman who was like the worship leader for a short period of time. But the people in the positions of power, let's say, were all men. Thinking about it now, like yeah, they were all men. Which that's another conversation, I guess.
I love it. So anybody else in your family play music? Your parents, were they musicians as well, or?
Not really. Like my mom, she sang again in church. She sang in a group. My dad, he played a little bit of clarinet, but apart from that, wasn't really into music like that. But my older cousin was really the one who, I saw regularly playing and doing things, and he really was the one who inspired me to. And he took me to places, as I got older, and showed me what it was really about being a musician. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's in large part thanks to him that I'm here talking to you now.
I love it. I love it. So tell us a little. So let's fast forward a little bit. As far as you were growing up in the church, you have your clarinet. Your cousin invited you to kind of learn more about the industry. And what happened? Did you go to school for music? How did all that transpire to get us to where you are today?
Yeah, so I picked up the saxophone when I was about 17. So probably about 6, 7 months before I went to university. I studied music at university and, just went through that whole thing of learning, I was still playing clarinet, so I was playing in the orchestra as well, and then getting into jazz. And then, that whole side of things really started to take hold and exploring music of, Coltrane and Miles Davis and Sonny Rollins and all these other great musicians. Again, and I have to say, for the purposes of this interview, men, a lot of men that was consuming their music. So even, this whole time it's all male dominated.
And that's the interesting thing about your book, because it's like, where are the black female composers? You've written several books, like you've written and I because my son is in classical music, I understand the challenge, particularly for people of color, to rise in that arena, because sometimes with my son they try to put him in jazz, or they try to steer him toward gospel, but he's like, no, I want to play classical. I want to be a classical pianist. And so I think it's important. The one book particular that I see that you wrote, if I were a racist, exploring racism in music, music teaching. I mean, I think that's even important, because that foundation of where children are starting their musical journey or career, it begins with those teachers. And if those teachers don't have the foresight to see the future or potential in that student, that could hinder them. I mean, that could literally squash a kid's dream. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to write that book.
Well, that book was years in the making. I think that's one of those projects that, bits and pieces of my life kind of went into that. And I wanted to write a book that really spoke to so many of the little things that I noticed in my music education and other people have said, and, just attending conferences and so on, conversations that were happening around that. There's a lot of racism embedded in society just in general. And in order to, combat that, and we can look at the scores that, black kids get versus white kids and brown kids get versus white, etc. And really see that we're not being served enough. We're not seeing as many examples of black composers as we need to. Um, and even to another level, we're not seeing enough black British composers as much as we need to as well. Because what tends to happen in England is that we look a lot to America, right? So for the black heroes and stuff, we look a lot to America, not so much in at home. So, you know, part of all of that was just kind of saying, hey, how can we create a music education where we understand that there are biases, that we all have biases, but we understand that there is a lack of representation with black folks, with brown folks, with women, with non-binary folks, and how can we just make sure that when kids are in music education, they're not learning songs that are racist, they're not encountering teachers who have clear bias against them and their music. They're not encountering teachers who are ignorant to the fact that Florence Price was a person, and teachers who are willing to be open and to listen to music that was created not by Mozart and Beethoven and Bach, but by Florence Price and by many of the other composers that you mentioned earlier.
Right. And so who are you gearing this book? Do you have, workshops with teachers, music teachers? Like, who is your audience for this book?
It's definitely for music teachers, and obviously anyone else who's interested. But yeah, specifically for music teachers who are open to the idea. There are some who have read it out of wanting to pick holes in the arguments and denounce it, right? Which is, everyone's free to do that, but it's definitely for folks who understand that racism is a problem and who want to do what they can to make things better for everybody, but specifically black and brown folks.
Have you received any response from people who have read it and say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was doing this, or I'm going to make a concerted effort to not do certain things? Like, have you heard that kind of response?
Yeah, it's been overwhelming, to be honest. Obviously I'm based in England, and it's amazing to see folks reading it in Canada, in the US, in different places around Africa and Asia. Like it's amazing to see that. And yeah, folks have expressed the same thing, that there's certain things that they knew, there are other things that they didn't know, some of the details that are in there. And obviously my work is built on the back of so many other great educators as well. So this isn't just coming from me. This is research coming from other folks, other marginalized folks who are writing about the same things and saying, hey, we're here, we exist, and our music deserves to be studied and taught as much as anyone else's music.
What is maybe like one of the top things that you teach in your book, that you want people to know about racism in the music teaching industry?
That's a very good question. I'm racking my brains to think of something. I think one of the main things is the idea that we have this hierarchy of composers, and we have these people who sit at the top. And while it was great researching that, it was really also quite harrowing to see how, even in music education, we like to think of it as being this really nice, pure, amazing thing. Even still embedded within that are still issues and problems that many other folks have written about. That the commercial aspect of still marketing certain racist songs, or how folks have like exploited the labor of other folks and so on. So it's a really complicated web of topics and issues, and just that historical side of things really help people to see, actually we're a part of a wider picture, and it's not just someone pointing a finger and saying, oh, you're racist, you need to stop being racist. It's a bit deeper than that.
Right. So what was something that you said during the research was a, you know, eye opening for you? What was one thing, in particular that you found out that you learned that you were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this existed, or I didn't know the extent to this was happening? What was that?
One of the things was the discovery. It was a man by the name of David Hunter, he's British, but now he lives in the States. And he was doing some archival research, and he discovered that essentially the composer Handel, he invested in the slave trade. And when he was living in London, and that was one of those things that you never expect to come across, but when you do come across something like that, it opens up so many questions around. Some folks I know have said, well, he didn't know what he was doing, or other folks have said, well, he did. It was very common to do that. It wasn't an issue back then. That was just what you did because it was a big industry, right? But then it also begs the question of, do we look at his music any differently, right? Because if he invested in slaves, how does that taint his music, or does it taint his, should it, right? And then that opens up a larger question around, at what point do we say, oh, here's a composer, and we ignore their personal life, or we include their personal life in the analysis of their music, right? So, and it's very interesting, even talking about Black women, again, to what extent do we just focus on their music as opposed to, the means by which they made their music and the stuff that they are talking about in their music? Can we really separate the artist from the artist from the art, right? And that Handel example is I think a really systemic way of looking at it, as in how much of his, given the ecosystem of slavery at that time, how much of his music was actually funded, right? How much was his music funded by slavery itself?
Yeah, that's deep. That's pretty deep. And I mean, and you bring up a good point. Music is something that's universal. It's worldwide. Everybody can relate to music, even if you don't even understand a language. If you feel the rhythm and the beat of that music, you fall in love with it. And do we look at the people who compose or create those musics as people and they have their own flaws, or it's musicians and they're entertaining us? So I think that that is a challenge, that when we start looking at the history of the people behind music, particularly classical music, does that taint our view of them, and does it make a difference when we say, oh, maybe I like to perform this piece, and then you're like, well, should I encourage this since he may have gotten the money from the slave trade? So you get into that. Do we love music for the sake of music, or do we start diving into the personalities of the individual people and their flaws? I mean, then that's a whole different onion to start
Yeah.
pulling. So yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. That's one of the things that you teach in your book. I love it. When I was researching you, you have the book, The World of Music. Why is my piano black and white? Where are all the instruments? I mean, I love how you're really focusing on youth in music, because I believe you, as a young person, you have a different energy about yourself when kids probably see you sharing and talking about music. So tell us a little bit about what you do with youth in music and how do you engage with them?
Yeah, I think part of the reason I kind of went down this path is because I realized there's a lot of great stuff out there for let's say older kids, but for independent learners, let's say, but not as much for younger children. And also, there was a report by is an organization called the CLPE in this country in the UK. I think it's about 2017. They came out with a report where they looked at ethnicity and representation in books, and within there wasn't much black representation across the board, but within music, I remember it was something like 0.005% or something like that. It was minuscule. So from that point, I was like, okay, I can, if I write something that has, that highlights black people and has even just has black characters, brown characters, white characters, doesn't matter. But at least if there's some representation in there, then that's speaking to something else outside of the music too, right? So I think in everything I do, it's not just about saying, oh, here's a composer. It's also about in that in that music sphere, helping them to see people from different backgrounds making similar kinds of music, making different kinds of music, but seeing how that's reflected in their student population, for example, or that's how they interact with their neighbors. And I'm always very conscious of bringing up the fact that we can use music to teach about life and help kids, especially in today's climate of, anti-immigration and kind of, anti-trans, anti so much, right? About how there are kids can see musicians who are making music of different backgrounds, different faiths, different ethnicities, different everything, and hopefully can, if they encounter folks who are different to them, see that, all right, they can start to see the humanity in them. Hopefully that comes across like through the music itself. So, um, as well as just bringing up some fun facts, some weird stuff that, people have done because people are people, right? But it's always with the idea of kind of say, humanizing people and humanizing composers and stopping young people from seeing composers, using that word composers as, that person who sits at a desk and writes music by hand and saying, well, no, people used to do that. Great. But there are composers of all shapes and sizes who do it in many different ways today. And you can do it right now if you want to. You know what I mean?
And I love that, because Stevie Wonder is a composer, Alicia Keys is a composer. I mean, I think in our minds when we hear composer, we're thinking, oh, a classical music person who's composing that, and not realizing, Tupac was a composer. All these people, they're creating music, and they're composing it. And I think I love what you do is you're taking that language and you're bringing it to a more modern vernacular for these young people. And even in your podcast, I listened to a couple of your podcasts. One was about hip hop, and the history of hip hop artists. I think you mentioned Queen Latifah, in one of them. And so you're really bringing music to the young people in a way that they can understand it. And it doesn't seem like old and stuffy, and just maybe just black and white images. So I really love, what you're doing. And like, we talked earlier about your book, Where Are All the Black Female Composers? I think that is really important because, like I mentioned earlier, Erlin, who's a composer, there in Europe, in the UK. I never knew that there were black women composers. And to meet her, I mean, it was just amazing. And to learn that her background is she creates music for the King of England. Like that's her job to, they have an event. We need you to make, a song. So that is amazing. You talked about the minuscule number of, black composers or people of color in the music education field. The women are even less. So tell us a little bit more about how you got interested in highlighting the black women composers.
That's a very good question. It was, and it's kind of one of those things, a long time in the making, right? Like you don't just like wake up and decide I'm going to write a book. I think for most folks, it's like there are thoughts, and when you decide to go and do it, it's that there are so many ways in which you want to translate that message that already been percolating in your mind already. So I think specifically about creating a book for about black women, I made a blog post about, because at the time everyone was talking about, more representation, blah blah. So I was like, all right, cool, let's do a blog post about black women. So it was just a simple, 10 black women composers that, that you should learn about. And, it just took off. And so I realized, okay, well, clearly people want to learn more. So maybe there's a book in there. So I just decided to sit down and just do the research and just do the writing and put it all together, and put it out there in the world. And I'm so grateful that people have, learned about so many composers. And the book is old now. Like I published it in 2020, so it's 5 years old now. And I've met personally like many women who weren't included in the book for many reasons. Some who have just started their careers, and others who, didn't have a presence online because I was just doing research online at that point. So at some point, I'm gonna have to do another version, and it might even be twice as long, right? Because there are so many others that we've learned about, we've discovered since, or rediscovered, I should say, since learned about, and other young composers who have come up in the last 5 years, some of whom, as a direct result after 2020, after when we're far more conscious of empowering, young black folks and brown folks, and in this case, black women, who have said, all right, great, I'm going to start on my journey. And so, I'm hoping maybe in a couple of years' time, I'll do a new version and it'll be even bigger. That's just the hope. We just keep growing it. Because there are some women in there who I've met who were so grateful that they've been recognized for what they do, and, my mom raised me, I have two daughters. I'm married to a black woman, so for me, it's also for them too. It's also for them. My god daughter, she's black. Like, so I want them to grow up, and my godson as well. I want him to grow up to see black women doing amazing things as well. So, yeah, it's for everyone. It's for my family. It's just for all of us to celebrate these women who, for many years, haven't really got the recognition that they deserved, really.
And I love that because, people think about books. I interviewed someone not too long ago and he teaches diversity. And he was like, oh, let me find a book that shares what I teach. And he was like, I couldn't find it. So I had to create the book myself. And I think that's what you're doing. It's like you saw that there was a need and you're like, I'll create it. And basically, what you've done is you're sparking other people's attention to say, yeah, where are all the black women composers? And like you said, there are women coming out of saying, I'm a black woman composer too. And I may, maybe not been in this particular book, but you do a volume two or, a bigger, revised version with more women. And it's celebrating these women in an amazing way. And I really love it because it's fun. It has fun facts, a fun guide. Now, do you do the art in the book as well? Do you create the art?
No, no, I didn't do the art.
Okay. Do you have a friend who does helps you out?
Yeah, I found someone who was great. Like she did all the artwork and all the drawings and everything.
Yes.
So we worked together on probably about 5 or 6 books now, I think.
I love it. I love it. And the images are engaging and even though they're black and white, still have a lot of depth to them and character. So I love that. And that's what kids need. They don't want another textbook. They want something that your kids love graphic novels. So your book has like a graphic novel appeal to me as well. And I love it. And like I said, you've done several books, since this. What are you what musician in here maybe that you met or you have not met maybe they're long gone, that is your favorite women composer so far?
I can't have favorites. I think one of the people in there is she's a friend of mine, and it was really an honor to have her in there because I've performed with her before. I've known her for years now, and to be able to put someone in a book who right, who you can just like pick up the phone and call was amazing, honestly. And
What's her name?
we Cassie Kanoshi, she's near the end of the book. So yeah, without saying anyone's my favorite, it was just great to be able to be like, these women, exactly, there she is. Like, these women are not out there just like, I know some of them, right? I know some of them, and I know her, and I can put her in this book, and I'm not putting her in there because, just because. I'm putting her in because she deserves to be in there because she does amazing work. So yeah, I'd have to pinpoint her as, but also so many others like Florence Price. It would have been amazing to have met her. Julia Perry would have been amazing to have met her. Chiquina Gonzaga. Again, we forget, the history of the slave trade. More people went to South America than they went to America or to the Caribbean. So, her being in Brazil, that's a whole story in and of itself, right? And what she had to go through to end up doing what she did. So, there are so many in there, so many. It'd be amazing to sit down and listen to and learn from. But there are many, and I've had a couple of interviews with a couple of women in the book since then, like Catherine Bostic, Joyce Lindsay Chambers, who I think it was in not the last Super Bowl, the Super Bowl before, she wrote some music that appeared in an ad during the Super Bowl, which is incredible. So black women are out there doing their thing. And Erilyn, I've never met her, but hopefully one day we'll meet. And her music is incredible and her story is amazing. And I'd encourage anyone to check out more about her. She's got a book out as well, so you can learn way more about her life. Um, yeah, there's too many women in there to to
Wow. Yeah,
mention.
yeah, I have her book too, and I love her story. And I like what you're saying, that there are women who there are women you can talk to and you can touch, and they're still alive. And I think if there are young women, particularly young black girls, who may be thinking about this as a career or even interested, these are people they can probably find on Instagram, or they can email them,
Yeah,
or Google them, or visit their events in real time. And I think that's important for our young people, that not all their legends or all of their role models have to be dead. It's like people are alive today doing great things that can inspire them, and they can touch them, and enjoy them, and maybe get advice from them. So I love the fact that your book is not just, people who have passed on, but people who are still alive today doing great things, and continuing on that legacy to do so much more that we haven't even probably seen from them yet.
yeah, exactly. And like I said before, there's more to come. So yeah,
I wanted to talk more about, so the book became, I talked about the project I worked on with Bradford Marcellus, that the symphony, put to music. This was recently put to music, I saw, and was the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. Tell us a little bit about
yeah,
that.
this
That's amazing.
the CBSO, the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. It happened back in February 2025. Yeah, I had a selection of music from Black women, and I mean, I say we, I didn't play, but they performed it for a concert, and it was amazing. We tried to make it. It was a family concert, so it was very family friendly. There were babies there, there were people of all different ages there, different ethnicities, and it was just a great celebration of some amazing music played by incredible musicians as well. So like, hopefully, we can do that again in different cities around, not even just around England, but around the world, hopefully, and just bring this music to many, many different people. And it impacted a lot of people, which is amazing. And again, this is their music. You know what I mean? I'm very blessed to have, just put their names down on paper. But this is a celebration of them. It's their music. So I didn't host it. We got someone called Yolanda Brown, who's a amazing saxophone player, presenter in the UK, who presented it. Because again, it's like it's not about me. So we make sure we get a black woman up there who's gonna, to lead the concert. Because that's also important too, right? To make sure that, you know, if we are supporting, folks who we aren't a part of, that same demographic, that we we can step aside and say, I've created this thing, but this isn't for me. This is for you. So you need to go and take it further.
I love it. I love it. And I think that sometimes is hard because it's your baby, but at the same time, your baby needs to go out in the world and blossom in ways that maybe you just can't, do, and it takes somebody else to take it to a different tier, a different level. So I love that the fact that they're bringing these composers to light, in that way, the symphony, and maybe we can get you here in the U.S. and we can bring all our books together and do something really cool and fun with the Black female composers. I love it. And
I think
so,
we should.
um, I also wanted to, let me see, what else was I wanted to talk to you about? Oh, so, let me see. Oh, the BBC. So your article was published in the BBC magazine. Was that based on the Black women composers? That's exciting.
Yeah, that was a slightly different one. That was 10 pieces that I was, really into at that point in time. And so yeah, that was again just a great moment to kind of be able to just dig into some music, listen to it, write a little bit about it, and then share it for the world to see. So, hopefully people went and read the article, and then most importantly, they went and listened to the music and found out more about these women.
Sure. I love it. I love it. So what else is coming up for you? What are some big things that we should see coming up from you in the future? Your website is amazing, so I'll definitely put the link to your website in there. People can see all the cool things that you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm trying to put together some videos, in so different ways to kind of bring all of this to life because, in these days, yes, it's great to get kids to read, and part of it is also kind of, promoting literacy skills and getting kids to read. But a lot of people are consuming media these days, right? So whether it's TikTok, like short form, or Instagram, or kind of longer form stuff on YouTube, whatever. So I'm just in the process of creating more videos, not just about Black women composers, but also just 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 musicians in general and musical ideas and so on, so that if children are interested in, whether it's Mozart or it's, you know, Cassie Kanoshi or whoever it is, Miles Davis, just to make some content so that they can check it out, and hopefully it'll be engaging and fun, and light, so that it doesn't feel like it's homework to go and research. Hopefully it's just, I can casually just listen to watch a video, learn a bit, and hopefully you never know where that can take a young person. So yeah, that's the watch out for that.
I love it. I love it. And I did something with the girls. I have a nonprofit girls organization. We focus on media, and what we created a coloring book of Black Women First in Kalamazoo, and then they created videos called Your Turn, which they were like 2 minute mini docs on and I'll send you the YouTube link. But it's 2 minute videos, and the girls are basically doing a recap of that woman's life. And then at the end, they say, now it's your turn. So it's kind of like this person did this, and now it's your turn. So we really got a lot of great response from that because the voice of these mini documentaries are young girls. And so you're hearing these young girls. So maybe your daughters, I don't know how old they are, but having young people narrate your, mini doc script with the images of the people, I think that allows them to be a part of it, as well. Or maybe,
Yeah.
it's a contest where you're like, hey, send me your video on this, composer that you like the most, and it can go on my page or something. But yeah, kids, they love media, and they create media all day. They're looking for a reason. It's like give them a reason, and they'll create something fun. So I love this. So are you having any plans to come to the U.S. anytime soon? How often do you get over here?
Oh, there was a period of time I was visiting like every year, but I don't have plans this year. But I'd love to try and arrange something to come over and do some stuff, workshops, talks, whatever it is, because we have our own perspective of things over in Britain, and I know there's a lot going on in the States right now. So, hopefully, yeah, there can be something in the not too distant future. But yeah, hopefully next year that'd be really cool to come over and do some stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I have a couple little hands in different orchestra things here. I'm actually going to the Kalamazoo Symphony Orchestra Gala this Saturday, so I'll kind of drop it in their little spirit to see if there's something we can do to get you over here. I think that'd be pretty cool and fun. They have a musical story time event every year, and that's where my book and Bradford's work debuted. And they usually have like before we did it, they were like, oh, we have like 250 people who come. There were over 1,100 people who came. And I think it was because there were people of color for the first time really featured in this musical story time. Like my son is, a native of Kalamazoo. He lives in New York now, and he has a Billboard #1 on classical. Like he, produces his own album. So people were happy to see him come back and perform and share his story. And then with Bradford's in this storybook, it brought, like you said, all families, all demographics came out and really enjoyed it. So I think it's a momentum. I think they want to keep going, and I think something like this would be great. So I definitely mention that to them as well. Anything else you want to add before? Did you see the homework I gave you about Once Upon a Time? Um, part
I,
did you
I
see
didn't,
that?
but I'm down.
Ah, you didn't see the homework. So basically, at the end, it says, you know, all of us authors have a story, and sometimes we don't encapsulate it in a nugget. And by doing that, it lets us even look back on our own journey. So it's called Once Upon a Time. I usually have authors, say, Once upon a time, there was a little boy who, and you kind of think like, who what, who wanted to, whatever. And they did this and they did this, and it ended up becoming that. So I know, like, one person said, once upon a time, there was a little boy who wanted to become a pilot. And when his grandmother died, he learned about um, her photographs and the records that she kept in her trunk. And it got him interested in history. And he started learning more about the history of his family. And he started helping other families share their history. And today he has an African American museum in Grand Rapids. And that's what his purpose was, to tell stories of other people's families. So it's like it may start off one way and then your life goes in a different shift. And you're pretty young, so it can shift more. But just kind of in a nutshell, once upon a time there was a little boy who, and just kind of tell us your story.
Okay. Once upon a time, there's a little boy who wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his life, skated through, was kind of good at some stuff, not so good at other things. And one day realized that there were so many stories out there. And he enjoyed history, he enjoyed music, and decided, hey, why can't these two things work together? So he decided to do some research. He decided to tell some stories to his friends, and they really enjoyed the stories, and they really thought that the information was new to them and it inspired them. So he decided to do more. And that meant writing a few books, and it meant making a few videos, and it meant being in front of kids. And he just loved telling stories about people who the kids had never heard of before. And he loved sharing the music the kids had never heard of before. And that's what he decided he wanted to do for the rest of his life.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. And you're doing a great job with it. And I mean, I'm an older person, so I tell my kids all the time, like I tell you, you never know who's watching you. Like, people are watching you and watching what you're doing, and you have no clue who they are. So, like me, I pop up out of nowhere, out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the United States to interview you. You just never know who else is watching you. So, keep doing the amazing things that you're doing. Be inspired. Let me know if there's anything. If you're ever in the U.S., come over. Let me know. We can maybe meet, or whatever. But I'm supporting you. I'm your cheerleader over here, just pushing for the best for you. I know there are many more books you have inside of you that are going to come out, and things like this not only celebrate our past, but it's celebrating the women of today to inspire the generations of the future to be amazing, Black women composers. So I thank you for what you're doing in the music industry. And tell us a little bit more about how they can learn more about you. Tell us, share your website and anything else you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is Nate Holder my website is nateholdermusic.com. If you want to check out my podcast, there's a link to the podcast on the website. But also, if you go to Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you get your podcast from, and you type in the Wire Music Podcast, then you'll find my podcast with episodes about anyone from, who do I have on there? Queen Latifah to John Blank, who's the first Black person of which we have a name and a picture of in Britain, who was around in the 16th century. And yeah, so a couple interviews with different people, and many other musicians that we check out. So check those out. And also on Instagram, N8 holder, and you can see me on there as well.
Okay, great. And so what is your dream? Like if you can sit back and say, wow, if this happens, I can just like go take a vacation for a while and relax because this is what I really wanted to happen so far in your life. What is a dream or a big goal of yours?
Oh, that's a good question. I think broadly speaking, the dream is to keep highlighting the stories that aren't being told and present them in a way that's accessible for young people. So that's whether that's books or videos, concerts or in person, that's the dream. It's just to make sure that when I've left this earth, there's a bunch of resources that young people can pick up and learn about people that, your generation, my generation had no idea about. That's the ultimate dream.
I love it. And you're doing it. You're on your way to doing it. So thanks again for being on Girls Talk Books.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That was Nathan Holder, the author of Where Are All the Black Female Composers? To learn more about Nathan's other books, visit his website at thewhybooks.co.uk. This episode was hosted by me, Sonia Hollins, and produced by M2 Macmillan Media. Are you an author with an amazing story to share? Or do you work in the publishing industry with insight that can inspire others? Well, we want you on Girls Talk Books, where voices matter. Or are you an aspiring author with a story to tell? Well, we can help with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more.